Hello, everyone, and welcome to the CWL Fancast. I'm Jacob, and I'm joined, of course, by Marcus and Sophie. Do you guys want to say hi?
No.
Well, you've fallen into my trap, Sophie, because you saying no is the same thing as acknowledging your own presence, which is what I was trying to achieve. So,
I will acknowledge nothing, not even my own mortality.
anyway,
Yo, can we just that theme music though? That was really good.
it was so good. This is the first week of the theme music, and I'm sure it won't. I'm sure it won't be different or anything next week, or maybe better or anything. Anyway, we had a pay-per-view this past weekend, I should say.
Hell yeah, we did.
And it was Verdict, and it was incredible. Would you say, I mean, this is, there have been not a lot of shows so far, but would you say show of the year?
That's tough. That's very tough. Mary Mayhem was quite good.
But Mary Mayhem wasn't
but-
this year.
Oh yeah.
Exactly. See? That's what I'm talking about.
My
And not
listen,
just
my brain don't work today. Brain not do too good.
If Mary Mayhem had been this year, I would see why it would be such a struggle. But this was a really incredible show.
Yeah, I'd say Verdict then. Of the year 2021 has been the best show.
Well, let's jump straight in onto the pre-show. We had a lot of very exciting developments over the course of this show. Is there anything that you would like to start out with? Anything that anyone wants to say before we dive into the actual matches themselves?
Well, actually, I do have a bit of an update. A couple weeks ago, because we were talking about investigating Raymondonia, I actually did get in contact with an unpaid intern, and we do currently have someone being sent to Raymondonia to do field research.
We have
hopefully we'll
someone?
Yeah, I did a couple deals, and I managed to get someone. So in about 6 months or so, they'll come back from Raymondonia, and they'll be able to answer all our questions.
Well, I'm looking forward to that because I certainly have a lot of questions about Raymondonia. Once again, as I said, this was, a very exciting show. Fortunately for me, unfortunately for all of our loyal CWL Fancast listeners, we did not have a preview episode for this pay-per-view. So we did not make you did not get to hear our predictions, which is good for me because all my predictions were wrong. But yeah, so now no one can laugh at how wrong I was, but that's okay. Should we start off on the pre-show? Should we just jump right into it?
Yeah, let's start with the pre-show, because we had The Hunt versus Amber Arcade and Lady Britannia, and this is a match that we sort of speculated about possibly happening, and we finally saw it here, and it was actually a really good opener for the show.
Absolutely. I would go so far as to say match of the pre-show.
I mean, there's a 33% chance, so yes.
Yeah, and when you do go one-on-one with another wrestler, actually we're not gonna get into the numbers right now. But anyway, so I did have high hopes for the team of Amber Arcade and Lady Britannia. I thought that they had a shot here at, not dethroning because the Hunt are not champions, but overcoming the veteran team of the Hunt. That is, of course, Tiffany Quinn and Belle Florent. They were unable to do so, but they had a hell of a showing in their first attempt at it, and perhaps this could be a more permanent staple of the women's tag division.
Yeah, and I think the fact that they were able to take the Hunt, who's sort of been... They aren't the champs, but they're sort of the top dogs in the division, as the current champs don't really team up too much. For them to pretty much go shot for shot with them definitely shows that, even though it's their first match as a team, they definitely have the potential to go far.
Absolutely. And, Belle Florent, I would say, surprised me with some of the viciousness of her offense. She was throwing out those misery cord shining wizards and just absolutely rocking the skulls of her opponents. It was very, very impressive. And that is definitely, I think, what secured the key element of the Hunt's victory was right there with Belle Florent.
yeah, I don't think you could really argue with that at all. I mean, Belle Florent just week after week seems to get better and better, and she was already very good, but every week, everything she does just seems to improve.
Do you think that the Hunt will be looking for an opportunity to get at those women's tag team championships?
Well, from what I hear, they will be defended, I want to say on the 27th of February. So, there's a chance that by the time they get a chance for the titles, it won't even be the Black Rose and Sarah Price holding.
Who are the challengers?
I believe it's Quinn Edwards and Cassidy Clark. Sort of interesting tag team, to say the least. As Quinn Edwards, the one that beat Cassidy Clark for the title, but keep your friends close and your enemies closer. They could very well have a shot at taking those titles off of the Black Rose and Sarah Price, especially as on that show, Sarah Price already going to have a match earlier in the night against Selena Adams in a tournament final. So it's going to be a very interesting contest that if you weren't a usual viewer of CWL, you might want to at least check that match out.
Usual viewer of CWL or of Wildfire?
This is at Wildfire Pro Wrestling.
All right.
If I'm not mistaken, isn't there a chance that Sarah might actually have 3 matches that night?
Yes, if she wins the tournament final in the opening match, she then has to fight Valencia, who's the Wildfire Pro Wrestling Women's Champion. She has to fight her in the main event. So Sarah Price could have to wrestle 3 matches in one night, which, as good as Sarah Price is, that's a hell of a task for anyone, especially given the caliber of opponents. I mean, you have Selena Adams, current Gold in the Bank holder, former Vindication Women's Champion. You've got Quinn Edwards and Cassidy Clark, both former Nemesis Women's Champions. And you've got then Valencia, who her legacy precedes her. So it's definitely going to be a tough night at the office for Sarah Price, and that's why it'll be an interesting thing to look out for. Because like I said, the Hunt definitely have got their eyes on on those tag titles once again. And I get the feeling no matter who wins at Wildfire Pro Wrestling, they have their next challengers lined up in Belle Florent and Tiffany Quinn.
Absolutely. And that was not the only tag match that we saw on the pre-show. Do we want to hop over to our very exciting next match that we had?
Let's hop on over.
Well, this next match was both a homecoming and a farewell all wrapped up in one, as Phil X teamed with Yamashita for his last match for the foreseeable future in CWL, and they were victorious against Kaz the Mad and the newly renamed Colin Prince, representing the FFF. I'm a little confused, I would say, as to why Yamashita has decided to retreat from CWL, just as it was seeming that he was about to kind of join with MD's group of pals. I don't know if they're really a group.
It could just be a thing of, he was only over here for a short tour, and he does have a lot of commitments elsewhere. Like we talked about Wildfire earlier, he's the current Wildfire Pro Wrestling World Champion, and he's a heavyweight champion over in Super Pro. So it's one of those things where I wouldn't be surprised if later on in his career we saw him come back to CWL. But right now I think, his tour is done and he's got some other things to focus on.
So, speaking of things to focus on, let's talk about Colin Prince. Obviously this is the man that was known as Colin Piper for a long time. Now seems to be going down a little bit of a different path. Changed his name, changed his look, changed his moveset. Tell me about it.
I'm actually surprised he was in this tag match. Because for those of you who weren't aware, Kaz and Colin were in this tag match because they were not voted into the YouTube title match, which we'll be talking about later in the night. I actually thought that Colin, being the fact that until maybe recently, and even somewhat to some degree now, he had this big fan following, and with the sort of reemergence as Colin Prince, I thought maybe that might, give him that edge to get that YouTube title match, but he competed here and still unable to win a match this season.
Yeah, it is, I guess he thought that his fortunes would turn by joining up with the FFF. Maybe it's not going exactly as he planned. Marcus, how did you feel about this match?
I honestly, much like Sophie, I expected this to be Chris Princess and Kazimad versus Alexa. I fully expected Colin to be in that YouTube title match, but the fact that he wasn't gave us a fantastic match here. Something that I did notice though was, uh, Colin still using that lariat. Maybe not using it as a finish, but still using lariats. And I wonder if that might have any effect on the main event that we saw later in the night. If maybe
It
that
could,
got into the head of Michael Young.
it very well could have, and I've got to wonder if maybe he's just doing it almost out of instinct. Like he isn't meaning to or anything like that, but it's like I'm in this, really bad situation. I've got to throw everything in the kitchen sink out at this guy.
That was a thought that I had as well. Um, Especially Colin Piper very much seems to run on instinct when it comes to his matches in the ring.
Yeah, he's not a strategical boy, to say the least. He seems very much so. He seems very impulsive, and you see that in his wrestling, and you see that in the people he chooses to follow, as he ditched Michael Young and immediately uh, got mixed up with the Fabulous Furious Freaks. I don't know if this is a good idea with Colin, but I don't know if Colin is necessary. I don't think it can get any worse for Colin, is what I'll say, because when you've yet to win a match in this season, you can't do any worse. The only way to go is up.
Absolutely. Yeah, if you're already at rock bottom, there's nowhere really farther down to go.
And speaking of going up, just on the other side of the ring, we know Yamashita for the time being is no longer in CWL, but Phil X, you know, I wonder if this tag win maybe raised his stock a little bit more.
I mean, it very well could have. It was definitely something where if he had lost, it would have done a lot more damage than, if he wasn't in the match at all, because he recently just came off of a very decisive, very dominant win by Chris Princess against him. So I think if he was to eat two straight losses in a row like that, he would definitely need to start going back to the drawing board. I think this was really just sort of showing, like, okay, I got rocked the other week, but I'm still standing and I'm still fighting.
Absolutely. And let's just hop on to the next match here. We have got Greteri versus Zyro Toa. I think everyone called this a very specific way, and I think it went very differently. Zyro Toa picking up the win after that huge Zyro hour. I heard a lot of people talking about this like it was a locked-in win for Greteri, and that is absolutely not how it went down. But we will have more news about Greteri coming up next. Let's go over this one pretty briefly. Does anyone have anything they want to say? I mean, we should go over this one briefly because the match itself went pretty brief. It was pretty one-sided.
Zyro Toa finally wins. Uh, that sounds rude when you put it like that, but at the same time, it's like, when was the last time we remember Zyro Toa winning a match? To be completely honest with ourselves, like, it has been a while, and I think we talked about Phil X needing to win. This was a do or die match in many ways for Zyro Toa.
Well, and something that we've touched on in the past with Zyro Toa is it's almost like he's almost right there every match, and then always falls short. And I wonder, and I'm hoping at least that this might be that turning point that he needed. Maybe he's made a full 180 and he'll be able to actually get more wins throughout the course of the year.
Absolutely. Zero got that big win. As I've made it very clear, I'm a big fan of Zyro Toa. I think he does great work. I think maybe this win over Greteri, even though I think a lot of people are focusing on other stuff that happened with Greteri later in the night, I think that this was definitely something to focus on, something to talk about, maybe something that'll get him, maybe not in a championship picture right away, but maybe on the path to being in that big spot. Are we good on moving on to the main card?
Yeah, I think so. And as we go into the card, I guess we'll sort of go over what all the stipulations were that were voted in as we go
Yes.
along.
That is my thoughts exactly. Starting off, we had something very non-traditional for CWL. We had an MMA cage fight between Danielle, Wright, and Yui Nishimura. And speaking of short matches, this one went very quickly, with Yui getting a knockout win after nailing a kick straight to Danielle Wright's jaw. We saw in the replay, I mean, her face looked like it was made of jello. It was just incredible.
This rule. Oh, sorry, I've been waiting to talk about this ever since the show
It was
went live.
such a good fight.
This ruled so hard. It was physical. It's everything I wanted for so much. It was physical. Someone was bleeding. Someone ended up with a broken nose. I couldn't ask for much else. I've got to be honest. Besides maybe like I don't know, a light tube or something. But this was fantastic, and I'm glad the CWLUniverse voted for it, and I'm glad we got to see it. Yui Nishimura though, big win here tonight. I know it's hard to say it's a big win when it's someone you've beaten multiple times in a row, but I think it just sort of cemented that that title she's been given, the J-pop shoot fighter, and it's just sort of showed that hey, it's not a stage name. I can actually break your face in multiple ways in under 5 minutes, and I think Danielle Wright found that out firsthand, or rather, first foot last
Ah!
Sunday. I've got jokes. But I'm very interested to see where Yui Nishimura goes from here. Because I think this is very much so, yes, let's close the book on Danielle Wright, and now she's moving on. But to what?
Yeah, she
Well,
definitively
see,
showed that. Oh, go ahead, Marcus.
I was just gonna say, I feel like Yui definitely showed that she has a really good mind for fighting. The psychology behind that fight was really interesting because she threw a Superman punch earlier in the fight, and that's what she used to set up that kick to the face. It was almost like she went for a Superman punch whenever Danielle went to block, and she said, "All right then," and just stuck her foot right in her face. I mean, it was like instantaneous.
Well, and another thing I noticed is that Danielle was going low a lot of the time because we saw her try and maybe use the ground game a bit more than Nishimura. We saw her get into nearly into a full mount there. And I think she's like, okay, Danielle's keeping close to the ground, and that's when the second she dodged low to the ground, that, like I said, that big boot, oh, just good shit.
I mean, it's possible she was looking to get in that Kimura. That's why she was trying to get her grounded. But she was not able to do so as she was knocked clean out with that big kick to the face. But up next, we had something very different than a very grounded MMA match. We had a tables match between Ebak and Jasper Starr. Jasper Starr, of course, the man who has been assaulting Ebak from behind the cover of a mask for a couple of weeks now, unveiled himself quite recently and challenged challenged Ebak to this match. And the CWLUniverse voted on a table stipulation, which Ebak won pretty handily. Just absolutely wrecked him by powerbombing him through that table.
Shades of Maverick Dallas with that power bomb.
Yes, indeed. I love a good power bomb. I love a bit of nice classic wrestling offense, and that is exactly what I got in this match. I mean, even though I guess a table isn't really quite classic wrestling offense, but the two, the non-traditional and the traditional came together to give Ebak that big victory, and maybe he's gotten the demon of Jasper Starr off of his back a little bit with that win.
Yeah, this is a very interesting one because I'm interested to see where Jasper Star goes now. Most of anything this match because he talked a very big game the past couple weeks, and then to sort of see him not deliver, that's happened hundreds of times in the CWL, and it will happen hundreds more. What's going to be interesting is does Jasper just fold his hand, put it in, just like, okay, well, I failed here, not going to try anymore? Or does he stick to his guns and be like, yes, I lost, but I've still got the same plan? Because like I said, we've seen this before where people, they talk a big game, they get their ass kicked, and then they backpedal or they just disappear off the face of the earth. Is Jasper Star going to backpedal? Is he going to keep going full steam ahead? That is what I want to see.
I mean, that'll certainly be very interesting to find out, and I think we'll find out in the upcoming weeks. Anything more to say about this match, or do we want to move on to the next one?
I'm ready to go move on to the next one. It was one of the matches I was most looking forward to be totally honest.
All right. Well, up next we had Rox versus Marilyn Benson in that coveted 2 out of 3 falls stipulation for the Vindication Women's Championship. Marilyn Benson able to score the first fall, but Rox got 2 in a row to finish it off.
This was a heartbreaker. Marilyn Benson has been trying to win a major title, and not to say the openweight title isn't a major title, but like a Vindication Nemesis Women's Championship ever since she got to the CWL. And this looked like it was it. The timing was right. She was all serious. She even got the first fall, and then, to put it bluntly, she choked. She couldn't get the job done.
I mean, she did, you know, that Benson blitz came out of the gate very, very strong, you know, firing on all cylinders, got that first fall, and what a spectacular fall it was. Just hit her with everything she had, hit that twisted, or pardon me, the arc's end. Very impressive, but yeah, in the end, it was not enough to overcome the pure power that Rox has, and I think the question still remains to be answered. Aside from a situation like Olivia Mistral, where she was aided by the Church of Steel, is there someone on that roster who can legitimately take that title from Rox's clutches? I'm looking down the list, and I'm just thinking Marilyn Benson was, in my opinion, the best shot out there. But, you know, Caitlyn was able to take her down, so maybe that's the future of the title.
You know, Benson definitely was who I had in that number 1 slot for who could take her down. But at the same time, you know, look back at someone like Kel. Kel's first loss in what, a year and a half, 2 years was to Rox, and nobody saw that coming. So I feel like what we'll end up seeing is somebody beating Rox that nobody expects.
I think, yeah, it's not going to come to a matter of... I don't think it's going to come to a matter of someone stepping up to the level of Rox, but rather Rox, whether through arrogance or injury, falls to the level of her contender. And this isn't to say, oh, you know, all the women on Vindication are, you know, bad or anything like that. But Rox has reached just that extra level as a champion where you're untouchable. It's where Kel was, it's where Michael Young had been for a very long time. And it's one of those things where once you get to that level, it becomes a matter of not when someone gets good enough to stop you, it's when you stop being the best you can possibly be. And I think when that happens is when Rox will lose the title.
Yep, I would definitely agree with that. I mean, it's got to be something along those lines. At this point, there's nobody that I've seen who can match the physical dominance that Rox has. So it's a toss up who could actually beat her, but I feel like it's definitely going to come down to her beating herself more or less.
I think the only person left on Vindication, in my honest opinion, who I think could go blow for blow with Rox at her best and have a feasible shot of taking... Actually, there's 2 people. There's Valencia, but Valencia is aligned with Rox. I doubt we'll be seeing that anytime soon. And then there's Yui Nishimura, who has been on an absolute tear ever since debuting on Vindication. I don't even think she's lost yet. And I'd be very interested to see what would happen if she went up against Rox.
Absolutely. I mean, especially with the... Sorry, pardon. Go ahead, Marcus.
Oh, you go ahead.
Well, I would say especially with the dominance she's showed over Danielle Wright in their 3 clashes, she might be the best shot on the whole roster to take out Rox. I mean, as we talked about in the 2 different knockout matches that we had on this card, you know, you can't do anything. You can't kick out of a knockout. You know, that's just a thing that your body does when it receives a certain type of punishment. You know, so if Yui hits that kick to the jaw, hits that punch to the face, Rox, you know, it doesn't matter how big she is, her lights might just turn off.
Yeah, very well could. It would be definitely an interesting match to see, but even if it did happen, my money would still be on Rox. Like I said, I think she's just on another level right now where it's going to be very hard for anyone to even come close.
Absolutely. Any more thoughts on this match specifically, or do we want to head on to what's next?
I don't have any tertiary thoughts. No.
Well, we've got some big news coming up next. Max Shearman versus Jack Steele. And the stipulation that was voted on was a shot for the YouTube Championship. Max Shearman, of course, held that YouTube Championship as a part of his initial, undefeated streak that he had going. Perhaps looking to reclaim a little bit of the glory he had back in the beginning of season 4. But Jack Steele certainly did not make it easy for him. The clashes between these two, as Max Shearman questioned his loyalties as a member of the Church of Steel, have been well documented. But speaking of members of the Church of Steel, we got some big news after the match. But before we get to that, what did you guys think of the match itself?
It was definitely it was a good little back and forth match. Max Shearman obviously picking up the win, and now he gets another shot at the YouTube title. It was very interesting, though. We didn't see... This was a match specifically given the sort of stakes involved, as well as the, the sort of, the context as to why the match is happening. I'm surprised we didn't see Isaac or Olivia Maestral out there in Jack Steele's corner running amok.
Yeah, it seemed to be very... I don't know if that was calculated on the part of management, if there was some kind of choice to prevent them from being at ringside, or if they had some kind of other obligation, or if Jack Steele decided that... Actually, no, I'm so dumb. I remember actually talking about this with Jack Steele in my interview with him last week. He said very clearly that he wasn't going to have anyone at ringside because he didn't want to... He wanted this to just be settled, he wanted this to be an internal issue between the two of them. He didn't want to bring the rest of the church into it.
Fair enough. Shows what I remember.
Well, it took me a second before I remembered as well, but just it feels like so much time has passed since then. This week has been a long one. I feel like it's been a very, very long time since the show actually happened, even though it was just a couple of days ago. But either way, the match had its huge conclusion where Max Shearman hit that electric chair half Nelson driver, absolutely driving the back of Jack Steele's neck into the mat, and then, to the surprise of I think every single person, Griteri showed up and beat down Shearman. It looks like he might have thrown in with the Church of Steel. What do you guys think about that?
That was really shocking for me. When Griteri first came into CWL, when he first showed up in Nemesis, and then after Nemesis moved on to Vindication, I honestly expected him to become one of the new faces of CWL, or of Vindication at least. Everything about him just screamed good guy. So to see him come out like this and attack Max Shearman, I don't know what his thoughts are, why he would do such a thing.
I mean, maybe. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised. We talked about how Colin Prince, was sort of acting on impulse when he joined the Fabulous Furious Freaks. We saw Griteri lose to Flapjack Carter and then lose to Zyrotoa. Both matches that people going into it thought, oh, Griteri's going to win. And then he did it. So I've got to wonder if maybe, those two big losses sort of got to him, and then that's when Jack Steele slid into the equation and said, hey, help me out tonight.
Yeah, so do you think this is just a one-time partnership?
I don't think it was a one-time partnership, but rather just, I don't think this was something where it was premeditated very long in advance. I wouldn't be surprised if I think if Griteri hadn't lost his Zyrotoa here tonight, we probably wouldn't have seen him go out there. I think this is a whole, cause and effect sort of deal.
Oh, that's a very interesting hypothesis. I wonder if we'll get a little bit of clarification as to Griteri's reasoning for joining the church on this upcoming episode of Vindication, but we'll just have to stay tuned and find out. Any thoughts on this match before we hop on to one of my favorite matches of the night?
No, I don't believe so. I
Nope.
think
All right, well, let's roll on right ahead. I'm gonna go from one of my favorite matches of the night to my favorite match of the night. This was a triple threat warfare tag match: Sons of Fenrir versus Anarchy Inc. We already knew about that, but a new element was injected into the mix in the form of the Broken Standard, and it certainly looked like they might be the ones to walk away with those championships. But Anarchy Inc., in an extremely dominant display, survived elimination. Not a single member of their team was eliminated. Or I guess that would only be, neither of their two members were eliminated. Stark Shields and Jacob Nitro held on strong through the whole thing, and in the end, it came down to the two of them versus Edward Bronson. Bronson went for that bloke breaker a couple of times, but he was overwhelmed by the numbers game, and Anarchy Inc. retained their championships against two Vindication teams.
I think this sort of goes to show my big thing going into this match was I felt like this might have been a bit too soon for the Broken Standard. Because I understand, yes, they beat Sons of Fenrir, and that was a very good win. Don't get me wrong. But at the same time, they're still very new as a tag team, and I think this match showed this. Because Anarchy Inc. did a fantastic job of at all times staying close to each other. Because you mentioned, like, he kept getting in the bloke breaker, and it kept getting broken up. I think the issue was Brubble got separated from Edward Bronson early. As a tag team, they just didn't have that chemistry together yet. And it ended up costing them. And I think if we ran this match back in like 6 months, maybe Broken Standard... Actually, I think Broken Standard would be the favorite. But as of right now, it's sort of just go to show that these guys are good. They just aren't that well put together as a team yet.
You just think they haven't had enough time to like really develop that tag team chemistry as of this point?
Yeah, like, this wasn't a match of skill. This was a match of teamwork. This was a match of showcasing tag team chemistry. Because in a warfare match, it's not about who is the better wrestler. It's what team can outlast the other. It's a war of attrition. And it's a lot easier to eliminate other members of the team when they're separated from their partners, or when they're not a cohesive unit. And I think we saw Jacob Nitro and Stark Shields are a cohesive unit. And they were able to, like I said, separate the team members, got it down to a 2 versus 1 situation, and they just sort of, business as usual from there.
Absolutely. So this was our second title retention of the night, and there were 2 more titles up for grabs in the next 2 matches, the last 2 matches of the night. Do we have anything more that we want to say about this before we move on to those 2 very exciting matches up next?
I do just want to mention, I really hope that we get to see Broken Standard continue. Like Sophie said, 6 months down the line, they very well could be the favorite in that match. And right now, they're one of my favorite tag teams. I hope that they continue. They don't take this. They take the loss with stride, and they just kind of they keep kind of doing their thing. I'd love to see them get another shot at this title.
Absolutely. All right, well, up next by fan vote, we had MD going up against Chris Princess of the Fabulous Furious Freaks for that YouTube championship. We did not know which member of the FFF it was going to be going into the show. I will tell you this, I did cast my vote for Chris Princess. In fact, I believe every stipulation that I voted for ended up being the one that was picked. So I was a very happy camper at the end of the night. Actually, the only thing... Oh, I don't know what just happened there. The only thing that I didn't vote for was I believe I voted for a cage match between Jasper Starr and Ebac. That was the only thing that I didn't get.
Yeah.
But aside from that, yeah, so I was very happy. This match was exciting, and I gotta say, I thought Chris Princess had it at a couple of points throughout the night, but MD overwhelmed him with those huge knee strikes and retained the YouTube title, going on to face another comer in the upcoming weeks. Probably his next defense will happen at Battle Lines. How did you think of how this all went down, and did you think that Chris Princess was going to reclaim his throne? He is, of course, the longest reigning YouTube champion in the history of CWL. Or was, I should say.
I'm going to be straight up. I thought Chris had this in the bag. I thought this isn't to discredit MD, but you look at the pedigree of Chris Princess. You look at, his legacy, how good he was last season, how good he is this season, how he has that element of surprise with the vote. I thought this would be, a done deal in certain aspects. And I think MD winning is a major upset here tonight.
I feel like MD winning that is just a testament to how good he actually is. Because if you think about it, Chris Princess has had all week to study MD. Whether he knew he would be in the match or not, which he didn't, he still could have potentially been studying tape on MD. MD didn't know who he'd be facing, so it's not like he could have just studied one particular opponent. So the fact that he was able to take someone like Chris Princess, someone who has this legacy of being one of the pillars of CWL, and actually beat him to retain his title, it speaks volumes about the type of competitor MD is.
Absolutely. And one thing that I've noticed recently is that MD cannot seem to stop mentioning Stardrummer LLC whenever he, addresses the CWL universe. Do you think he has his sights set on Pistolero or Michael Young for his next championship defense?
I very well continue, Marcus. Continue.
Well, I was just gonna say that is an interesting question. With Michael Young, based on some things we saw at the end of the night, I don't think that he will necessarily be someone MD could be facing in the foreseeable future. But that doesn't mean that Pistolero won't be. Pistolero very well could get a match with MD for that title.
Well, you said it first, so let's hop right into it. Up next, we had Michael Young versus Jack Thunderheart for the Vindication Heavyweight Championship. This match was knockouts only, and this was insane. Two insane things happened at the end of this match. First of all, Jack Thunderheart won and became the new Vindication Heavyweight Champion. I'm a big Jack Thunderheart fan. I certainly like the way he does things more than Michael Young, but I did not see this coming.
I think that Jack Thunderheart, this was an upset. I think we can all agree going into this match, Michael Young was the heavy favorite. Because I sort of mentioned it with Fox earlier, but Michael Young has been on another level for the past couple months where it feels like no one can touch him. I mean, we saw Mary Mayhem where he beat Pistolero and frankly made it look easy. And for him in his next title defense after that, to lose the title to Jack Thunderheart was very surprising.
Not only was it surprising, but what surprised me was just the sheer tenacity of Thunder. I mean, we see him go back to back hitting those finishes, and Michael Young just kept getting back up. The fact that it didn't really throw Thunderheart off of his game too much, I think shows that he was much more ready for that match than people realize.
Yes, indeed. I mean, he was certainly ready for the match, but let's talk about someone who wasn't ready for something. That was not a great transition. Not my best transition, but still it's accurate. Michael Young was not ready for Ricky fucking Valentine to show back up, hop out of the crowd, and absolutely beat his ass. I mean, what was that to end the show? Let's talk about that.
So it was 5 months ago that we saw Ricky get pile driven onto a steel chair?
Yes.
Yep. And it was, I think, a week before that he was thrown on a barbed wire table.
Yeah, so he's been gone for a very long time. And to be completely honest, many people are thinking that it's very possible that he would not be seen again. That his career could have possibly been ended by that attack. So to see him show up was definitely a huge shock for not just Ricky Valentine, but the fan. Sorry, not just for Michael Young, but the fans in general.
Yeah, this was crazy. I mean, I gotta say, I was tremendously excited to see Ricky Valentine back. He's a great wrestler, a fantastic performer as well. He really knows how to carry himself. and this was, this definitely, I think, Michael Young he's gotten a large dose of comeuppance in one night. He got knocked the hell out by Jack Thunderheart, and then it followed up by just absolutely getting a taste of what he deserves in terms of vengeance from Ricky Valentine, and I think this will steamroll right into battle lines.
And that is a match that I'm super excited for, because I would love to see Ricky Valentine get his hands on Michael Young in an officially sanctioned match.
That is going to be very, very interesting. Ricky Valentine, of course, was taken out of action by that chair pile driver. But now, I mean, when I look at the future of Vindication after this show, things look bright, I gotta say. Everything that's happening, I am very excited to see unfold on my screen, in pay-per-view format or on the weekly show. Everything that's happening is just very exciting, very fresh. And I just gotta say, I can't wait till this weekend.
Yeah, I can't wait till this weekend either, and they've already announced some. There was one part we skipped over, but I think we'll talk about it a bit if we do a bit of a, what to look forward to in the next week. But I'm really looking forward to some of the matches that we're being told about for this next upcoming week of shows.
Yeah, I think we're going to not do the preview this week. I think we're just going to be doing the review.
Okay.
And then next week we'll go back to. I think that the structure that we've decided to settle on, and if you want to change this, we can talk about this after the end of the podcast.
One thing I would like to bring up, because we didn't bring it up during the show, was Battle Lines is coming up. It's about a month away, and we've already started to see the chaos commenced. I mean, last week we saw Olivia Maestral and Catherine Love show up on Nemesis and take out Celine Adams and Quinn Edwards. We saw Alexander apparently aligning himself with Ken Warlock. We have no idea if Vindication has a men's team yet. It's all starting to become very chaotic, and I personally cannot wait.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited to see, because like you mentioned, Nemesis is definitely starting to shape up a team, but Vindication hasn't really shown anything.
At least on the men's side, yeah.
That's what I mean. Yes, not on the men's side. I'm interested to see, who would show up on that team. We have people, just people who took losses, at Verdict. All the members of Triple F, except for Rocks, so all the male members rather, that had matches. They took losses. They could very well show up on that team.
I'm
having a real hard time talking, guys. I apologize.
No, it's fine. I think Vindication's in a really weird spot right now on the men's side thing because it's so divided. It seemed there's sort of a running thing of like every Nemesis season there's a civil war. There's the one between the Disciples and the Truth of Fear, and then the Disciples and the Revolt. And now in Vindication, we see, you've got the Church of Steele, and you've got Fabulous Furious Freaks, and you've got MD and his, buddies, and you've got Starjammer, and you've got all these other people, and they're all just butting heads at any given time, where it's like, how could you get 4 people together to make one cohesive team? It seems nigh impossible for them.
It certainly does, and I'm sure we'll break it down in the weeks to come. Unfortunately, we are running out of time, so we got to wrap this thing up. I'm so excited to see what we've got coming up this week on CWL, and we are going to break down all the action and preview next week on our podcast on the CWL Fancast next week. So, on behalf of Marcus and Sophie, goodbye. On behalf of myself, also goodbye, and we will see you next week, and make sure to tune in to CWL Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.